started. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the second in our series of marketing automation webinars. Today, we're going to be discussing marketing and sales alignment, what misalignment looks like, and steps that you can take to improving alignment at your organization. I don't know about you, but I've been getting a bit of Zoom meeting fatigue working over the last couple of months. So this is a bit of a chance for you to take a step back from your usual day-to-day stuff, perhaps grab a coffee or a snack, move away from your desk or your dining table and make yourself a bit more comfortable on the sofa and hopefully enjoy the discussion we have today. Today's webinar will be in the form of a panel discussion. We've got 3 people joining us today with a wealth of experience across marketing and sales. So I'm really looking forward to putting some questions to them and picking their brains. Over the course of this webinar, I'm looking to cover 3 main areas. Marketing and sales misalignment, so what misalignment looks like in organizations, what issues it can cause. We'll then uncover benefits of working in harmony and why improving alignment is important to you as a marketer or a salesperson. And then how to align marketing and sales. This is where we get into sort of the meat and potatoes of the discussion. I'll ask the panel about strategies, tactics, and tools that they use to actually improve alignment. So I'll start by introducing who we have on the panel today. Firstly, we have Adrian Jones. He's the CEO and co-founder of Marketing Cube. He has over 10 years experience in senior marketing and sales roles with Dun & Bradstreet and Wolters Kluwer before starting Marketing Cube a few years ago. So welcome, Adrian.
Good morning, everyone.
We also have Marika Timmers on the line. She's a modern marketing consultant for Marketing Cube based in Auckland, where she helps businesses leverage the power of marketing automation, working with some of our customers over there, including Les Mills, Vodafone, and the University of Auckland. Over her career, she's worked with some of the fastest growing organizations in the world developing CX programs. So good to have you with us today, Marika.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Afternoon, New Zealand. Good morning, probably everyone else at this stage.
Thanks, Marika. And we also have Jay. He's a Senior Director of CX Solutions at Oracle. So Jay supports organizations across Australia and New Zealand in creating business advantages using data and tech. So also prior to joining Oracle, Jay worked on sort of both sides of the marketing and sales fence with various global corporates, including Thomson Reuters. And nice to have you with us, Jay.
Morning, Matt. Great to be here.
Hi, Jay. And I'm Matt Hemsley. I'm the marketing manager at Marketing Cube, and I'll be hosting the discussion today. We also have Jason O'Donnell on the line. He's the account director at Marketing Cube, and he's going to be monitoring the Q&A and the chat. A few things just wanted to make you aware of before we start. This is going to be a 40-minute webinar, panel discussion. So we'll have you out here by about 11:45. We're keen to make this as interactive as possible. So please drop any questions you have for the panel into the Q&A, and I'll put the question to them. And if you can use the Q&A function itself instead of the chat function, that'd be great. That way, other attendees can see questions that have been submitted and answered. And you can also upvote questions that you see in there. We will also have a couple of polls for you today. So you can see sort of where your peers sit with certain things. And just a sort of reminder that those polls are anonymous. So feel free to answer completely freely. And this webinar will be recorded and distributed as part of our post-webinar promotion. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And before we get into the discussion, I just would like to quickly explain who Marketing Cube are for those of you who are joining us that don't know us, because we do have quite a few prospects on the line. So we're a connected capability agency based out of Sydney, Australia. And we're an Oracle Gold partner focused in the marketing and CX space. We've got 3 main service areas. Strategic services, which covers marketing automation, CX planning, technical services, and obviously that's more of the technical stuff, things like implementation and enablement, and then customer success. And that's coaching and training for how end users can make best use of their Oracle CX Cloud software. And we work with a range of customers across different industries and regions, but here are a few of our larger clients, including some that we've actually worked with to improve specifically marketing and sales alignment. Now, to start things off, we have a poll. We'd like to get an idea of where you feel your organization sits in terms of marketing and sales alignment at the moment. So yeah, this is our first poll, and it's here to help you find out where your organization's alignment lies in relation to your peers. So I'll just launch this for you. Okay, so to what extent are your marketing and sales teams aligned? You say perfectly aligned, very aligned, somewhat aligned, or not aligned? So as you can hopefully see, the vast majority voted somewhat aligned. So that's good. You know, plenty of room for improvement. You obviously, made somewhat of a start on your alignment, but hopefully you get something out of the discussion today that you can then take back to your organization. So I think it is about time that we really got into. So moving into the first question today, and Marika, I'd like to put this one to you to start things off. How has the buyer's journey changed for you during your career, and what impact has it had on the relationship between marketing and sales?
Yeah, so look, it's changed quite a bit in my career, and that probably says just as much about my age as it does about the pace of change. When I started out in B2B marketing, the journey was really managed initially by marketing for the awareness stage. So we were very much responsible for brand reputation, and the marketing activities that we did on the back of that were obviously brand management, advertising, PR. We were also responsible at the other end of that journey for facilitating relationships, right? So there was a lot of event management, and those things still happen today. But sales were very much involved in owning the research and the consideration and that purchase phase. And that was largely done face-to-face or, in relationship-based activities. Our role as marketers in that awareness phase was to build that brand reputation for salespeople to get a foot in the door, to have those meetings. And what's changed over the past 20 years as digital became more and more sophisticated is people have started to do a lot of that research and consideration online, right? So I think the latest research that comes out of Gartner suggests that actually B2B buyers only spend 17% of their researching time in meetings with suppliers. So 20 years ago, that would have been huge, right? And now it's 17% of their time is spent actually meeting suppliers, and you're only one of the suppliers that they're meeting with. So maybe you'll get 5% of that time if you're lucky. So that means that the ownership of those research and consideration phases is a lot more shared between sales and marketing than it ever has been in the past. And in fact, in a lot of organizations, marketing will own those pieces of the journey. And they've taken a lot more responsibility for lead generation, whereas that previously would have been sole responsibility of the sales department.
Yeah, thanks, Marika. And you mentioned the Gartner report there about the amount of the research and awareness stage of the journey that sort of happens in digital channels now. And I wonder, Adrian, particularly with what's going on at the moment with the coronavirus situation, if maybe that's even shifting more into digital channels. I just wondered, how do you see the coronavirus situation impacting the buyer's journey, both now and at the moment in the short term, but also after we get over all this and in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, obviously sales teams have had to switch so quickly from everything that was sort of face-to-face and those sort of touch points, meetings, just doing everything online. So, it has had it's been a massive shift and really happened really quickly as well. So I think there were some positives, initially some novelty. People are pretty tolerant around, kind of how web meetings worked and those sorts of things. You can get to multiple stakeholders, where people are. So people are pretty accessible in lots of ways, and web meetings have got better, I think, as people have got kind of more practice with them. The negatives, I think people are craving sort of some personal interaction, and and that relationship building is tricky, right? Over a webinar, you just don't get that same body language that you got before. So people are trying to make up for that in other ways. I'm not going to talk about the economics and the short-termism and uncertainty, but it's a factor as well in the sales process, right? So longer term, look, it's going to accelerate the switch to digital even more. We hear lots of people already talking about online and hybrid type events, maybe a reduction in business travel where it's not required so much, people working from home and workplace flexibility. So look, it is going to have an impact, but it's only going to drive things faster to a more digital environment. We've noticed a lot more digital signatures, for example. It's become kind of accepted as that's the only way to get things done now. And so companies that before that were looking at it are now doing it. And I think also ultimately an increase in self-service, not just self-service in terms of sale, but self-service in terms of getting the information that you want and the research, which only just increases the focus that you need to have on the touch points when you get them.
Yeah, I think that's I think what Adrian said is spot on. What we're seeing at the moment is a huge increase in the customers doing that digital research, getting that unbiased opinion, and it's just accelerating the process from there. And so that now when we're engaging from a sales point of view, so much more of that work that Marika was talking about is done from the marketing. And that shift is, it was happening quickly, but because of the current situation, it's just escalating it so much faster.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see those significant increases in digital engagement for a while. There's a lot of people that have kind of been forced into it, and that's going to show an uptick in engagement for the next at least few months. But over time, I actually think that the importance of that human connection is going to become even more greater. And so for organizations that can leverage the digital engagement and do it in a way that is humanized and doesn't feel like you're engaging with an organization or a digital platform, those are the organizations I think that are really going to come out of this so much better off.
Yeah, some great points there. Thanks for that. Jay, just sort of coming back to you, I think before we get on to the ideas of, what alignment looks like, what good alignment looks like and how to do it, I thought it would be good to start off with some examples of where misalignment exists. And I just wondered if you've examples of either organizations you worked for or perhaps customers you worked with where you sort of started off with some sort of misalignment between marketing and sales.
Yeah, how long have you got? No, I'm just kidding. It's not really that bad. But yeah, it's when it happens, it's almost like it's almost like a Grand Canyon style gap, and you sort of sit back and wonder, how do we get to this point? And usually it's just, it's down to miscommunication. But simple example that I've had in times gone past is, different hemispheres have different, summer down here is obviously over the Christmas period, and summer in the north is obviously through June, July. An organization I was working with used to put out a best practice guide, and they would title it Summer Reading, and their marketing team would distribute it during the northern hemisphere summer to all their customers, both north and south of the equator, to the point that we would have customers in Australia and New Zealand during that June, July period being invited from our marketing team to sit by the pool and enjoy some quiet reading while the sun was out. So not the best alignment, and that would then in turn be the sales guys would be getting a call from us asking us, do you know that it's actually 6 degrees down here at the moment and we haven't seen sun for a while? So it's just a couple of misalignments like that. It doesn't make or break, but it doesn't show that the left hand sort of talking to the right hand at the best of times.
A key bugbear I've witnessed with clients is, as marketers, we spend all this time designing these beautiful pieces of comms, and it might be an email that is really seriously personalized and going out on behalf of a salesperson, and then we forget to tell the salesperson that it's going out. And, you know, if they are to get a call from a client or a prospect and know nothing about that, it just puts them on the back foot. So obviously, if we're designing these amazing emails, we want to make sure that we can leverage that from a sales perspective when somebody's interested. And it's a common courtesy to let the salesperson know, right?
Yeah, I think when I talk to clients, and there's clearly that sales and marketing misalignment, and I've had, you know, in companies I've worked for, it's had the same sort of scenario. But basically, it runs something like this. So marketing runs this big campaign and creates like all these leads, and they hit their lead target, and then all those leads get passed to sales. Most of them get ignored, or they're just too busy, but they sort of seem to be poor quality, and, you know, they're not really good leads anyway. Sales carry on, they make their calls and appointments, and ignore everything that's happened in the past. They just call and make the calls, and then they make their updates in the CRM kind of just about when they close the deal, so they get some commission. And that's kind of the process. And I'm pretty sure most people have been in organizations that operate just a little bit like that.
Yeah, thanks. Some really good points there. I think good examples of marketing, maybe not sort of following best practice, or mistakes by sales as well, and then a bit of a combination of both. There's some good examples. Thanks. And I think you've touched on this a little bit, Marika, so far in a couple of your responses. But, you know, if you've got any other ideas of why it's, you know, just important for marketers to take action to improve the issues caused by misalignment.
Yeah, so the key one really is it's important because that customer journey is not linear. We would all like to think that somebody starts at awareness, that they move into research, then consideration, and then hopefully they'll make a purchase. And if you've got an account management team, it gets handed over from there. But the reality is that leads jump around, customers jump around. They don't always go from left to right through that process in a tidy manner. And each stage of that journey, like I was saying earlier, is now shared. It's a shared responsibility, that research and consideration phase. And quite often also, depending on the organization, marketing could even be converting into purchase. If we just focus on acquisition, ultimately we're trying to enhance the quality of those leads, right? And this goes back to that same point that Adrian was just making around that age-old debate between sales and marketing around, you know, the quality of leads, the number of leads and the quality of leads. So to avoid a conversation where, you know, marketing are blaming sales for not being able to convert their leads, and sales are blaming marketing because the leads were rubbish in the first place, it's really important to sit down and define those terms up front. So what is a lead? What is a marketing qualified lead? When does it get handed over? What is a sales qualified lead? And even what is a disqualified lead, so that you can all agree. That makes everyone accountable, and it definitely stops the finger pointing that happens at, you know, in those campaign review sessions if the campaign hasn't performed.
I think you touched on something really good there. Is it's not a linear process. I think back when I was sitting in the marketing side of the fence, it was very much, all right, marketing brings the lead in, you pass it off to sales, and then sales will follow through. But now it's so entwined that, you know, as it goes through the sales funnel, there's still marketing elements that need to be addressed, and marketing needs to support sales as much as sales needs to support marketing in bringing those customers through the process further. And it's very much, you know, working side by side. The last thing you want to do is have a particular client at a certain stage. Sales hasn't communicated that back to marketing, and the marketing go and reach out to them with a message that's not in line with where they are in their buying cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think even though the process isn't linear, the amount that you know, and the information that you get, the understanding that you may have of that buyer going through the process may increase. And so you do have the opportunity to use that more and more through the process. So even if they do bounce back and say, oh, you know what, I'm putting this decision off for 6 months, or I need to get other stakeholders that weren't involved in the decision before, that doesn't matter. You're effectively moving back another stage, but you already know what you know, and you could use that to be more personalized in your communications moving forward and not go back and ask the same questions again. So I do think it's important that sales understand that the digital relationship, the relationship that buyer, is having with you may have started quite some time ago. It might have started, it depends on your sales cycle, but it might have started a year ago. You don't know how, and you've been building up that knowledge. So to just pick up the phone and make that call and go, what were you looking for, or how can I help you today, is just a complete waste of their time to go through all of that digital, everything that you could have gleaned, and just had a much more timely and relevant conversation around the sorts of things, and make a better use of their time going through that process. And Marika, you also mentioned accountability, and a lot of organizations that I talk to, that's a scary thing, right? Because someone has to ultimately agree that, not all the leads were as good as we thought they were because we've raised the bar, and sales have to agree that they're not quite as brilliant as they said they were, and they're not closing as many of the leads as are coming through. So there is that kind of agreement that you're going to mutually try and get to this goal, as opposed to both aiming at separate goals and doing brilliantly.
Yeah, and I think that digital marketing, that digital body language piece is really important, because if you go back to the way that things were and how marketers have had to adapt, into this digital world, and develop lots of different kind of content to serve in those different stages of the journey, sales have also had to adapt at understanding that digital landscape as well, and how they can use that so that when they get that 5% of time with that client, that they're making use of all of the information that has happened in the journey before them. And those are things like 20 years ago, a salesperson would have sat in a meeting and they would have understood the propensity to purchase just based on body language. Is that person smiling? Are they giving you eye contact? If not, maybe there's a few objections there that you need to handle. Now that's gone online, we're talking about, opens and clicks and visits being those cues that give you an idea of that propensity to buy. And all of that data is really important to arm your salesperson with before they go into that meeting and have such a small part of time with the prospect. They need to be really well prepped.
Great.
Yeah, thanks Marika and Adrian. I think you started to touch on a few good points I wanted to get into there. Sort of understanding the relationship that your prospects are having with your organization online, understanding that digital body language. So obviously the data starts to play a role there, and data becomes really important. Jay, I was wondering if you could add any points or expand on that in terms of how important data is to all of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially now that we're doing everything via a setup similar to this. Data is so important. Understanding, making sure that it's clean, having some central point that it resides in, so that marketing and sales are seeing the same information. If you have good, clean data and you know who you're talking to, what about, and when you're engaging with them, then it just helps enforce and ensure that that customer is having that clean journey. If the customer has that clean journey, then it means that they're having that pure engagement throughout, and they're not being told one thing and shared another thing in a similar in the same week or in the same conversation. And the way that you get to that is making sure that your data is correct, that it's clean. It allows for the individual who you are engaging with to have that seamless experience. And that's ultimately where you want to get, is as the customer moves from the marketing, from that initial unawareness, through to their research, through to engagement, through to the advocate. To get them through that path, it's all reliant on the data and on how clean your data is and can be shared between marketing and sales.
Yeah, cheers, Jay. Thanks for that. I think we kind of sort of set the scene quite well with some of those responses in terms of sort of why it's important and what misalignment looks like. I'd kind of like to switch up now and get on into, sort of the benefits of becoming aligned and what working in harmony actually looks like. And Adrian, I'd like to put sort of first question to you on this, in this sort of section. Because obviously, we're talking about like the benefit to an organization of aligning and all these sorts of things, but I'd like to get a bit more into detail about, how this actually benefits the customer, because that's, why we should be doing this really, and ultimately. So how do you think, or how does alignment improve the customer experience?
Ultimately, it's about having the right conversation at the right time, and talking to the right people. So, and avoiding, I guess, those irrelevant conversations or even communication. So it's really about trying to fine tune the organization, both the sales and marketing components, so that you're interacting with the customer at the right time. So conversely, as a customer, you're sitting there, you're not getting irrelevant communications. You are getting, a call when you want a call and guidance when you want guidance. So that's really that's the difference. In a nutshell, that's the difference of the experience that the customer is getting as an experience.
And then Jay, I've probably got a question for you here. In terms of, it's like, what business outcomes are there from improving alignment? Kind of thinking along the lines of, sort of the bottom line rather than just the sort of those sorts of types of things.
Yeah. And it really does. It really comes to the bottom line. So if we can get the alignment from marketing to sales, it improves the customer experience. If we improve the customer experience, and ultimately what we're getting is we're having a shorter sales cycle. But what also research shows is that we are able to increase the revenue from that customer and reduce churn. So ultimately, what is the business outcome from improving alignment? It's a customer who's going to stay with you longer and possibly in the long run spend more money. And that's, if I put my sales hat on at the end of the day, that's sort of where we want to sit.
Yeah, cheers. I think it's probably quite easy for everyone to get on the same page when you can show that there's, improvements to revenue, sales, etc. I think that's direction everyone wants to head in, don't they?
Definitely.
I've got another poll for the audience now. What hurdles do you have to improving alignment between marketing and sales at your organization?
Just while we're doing that, Matt, to add to Jay's comment earlier, I think actually, one of the key business outcomes is quality over quantity. We're so focused a lot of the time on number of leads. We're not always focused on quality of leads, and I know which ones are going to give, the better bottom line. And I know also salespeople would much rather have 5 high quality leads to follow up than 50, unqualified leads that may have come through for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think especially in marketing, in my sort of shortish career in marketing, sort of 5 years post uni, often the objectives for marketing have all been around, number of leads. And even, seeing sort of agency work as well. It's about how many leads are these campaigns generating, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, how many of these leads, like you say, are good quality? How many are actually converting further down the funnel, which, I think has been sort of neglected at times.
And I think that's because it's, for a lot of organizations, it's difficult to measure that attribution, right?
Yeah, true. It's just,
and that's,
isn't it?
Yeah. And we'll probably touch on that, and it's all around that alignment. It's, the questions, usually when you see a report, it's we generated X amount of leads for sales, and I 100% agree with Marika there. The train of thought needs to change. Instead of, not how many leads did we generate, but how many leads did we, were actually sales qualified taken, or to that even further, how many leads we generate that ended up turning into, a purchase or awareness or whatever we're trying to target. That's the ultimate goal. It's that quality over quantity, like you said.
Can also, just because we're on a run with this, but you can also extend that as well to leads over time, because sales organizations have a capacity. And so generating a whole wave of leads and giving the salespeople 200 leads when they have a capacity to deal with 5 a week doesn't make any sense, because the leads are going to go out of date. So what would be much better would be 5 good leads a week. That's what they need. So if you could organize your campaigns to generate 5 leads a week per salesperson, That would be ideal. It's not actually that difficult to do if you don't have a time-based campaign. You just don't put all your leads and structure your campaign to send it out to all your contacts that possibly meet a segmentation criteria at the same time. So I think there's an opportunity to look at leads over time, not just total volume of leads created.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys. Just going to share the results from the poll here. So bit of a mix of responses, but the majority saying the issues they have to improving alignment are lack of communication and different objectives and KPIs, which is, a couple of things we touched on, and I think examples we've sort of seen throughout our careers as well. So thanks for the response to those polls.
Probably the easiest ones to solve.
Yeah, good point. Now we're going to sort of switch it up a bit and move on to sort of examples of how you actually improve alignment. And Marika, I wanted to put this question to you in terms of what you think are the sort of the primary considerations to improving alignment.
Yeah, well, communication is key, right? So the first thing you need to do is agree the stages. What does your buyer journey look like? So we've talked about those generic stages, but every organization will have their own take on that. It's important to define ownership, who does what at each stage in that journey. And then you need to define the terminology together. So all of those things I mentioned earlier, what is a lead, a marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, a disqualified lead, actually what is a customer? And we did this exercise a few years ago just within Marketing Cube. And we all had slightly different definitions of a customer. It can actually become quite technical. So if you haven't defined and agreed those terms within your organization across your departments, every department that touches that customer experience, I suggest that should be one of the first things you do, because I think you'd be really surprised. Everyone assumes that they all understand what a customer is, but if you were to go out and ask different departments in your organization, I think you get a slightly different answer from each one of them. So that's really, really key. We all know what assumption is. Don't assume that everyone's on the same page with something so simple.
We've got a question that's coming from an attendee here, and just a reminder to the rest of the attendees, but feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions. So got a question from James, and he's asked, what's more important to prioritize? Alignment between sales and marketing or service and marketing? So I'll open up to anyone that wants to jump in.
I was gonna say actually that one of the most important things is aligning around those goals and how sales and marketing will achieve their key goals together. And we've talked a lot about acquisition, but it is actually right across the customer life cycle. And so it is, yes, sales and marketing typically at the beginning of the customer life cycle, but then think about as well, what are your goals for your onboarding experience? What are your goals for existing customers? What happens if there are service-related issues or service-related opportunities, or service are interacting with your customers? What then happens from a marketing perspective? Is there a follow-up or alignment subsequently that's related to that? So you'll see service, maybe what's happening in service is relevant to what you're doing with your retention campaigns. So it's thinking about those types of things. So yeah, we've taken quite a front-end sales and marketing view, but absolutely service and service interactions can add huge amounts of value and data to the marketing sphere, and vice versa. Service needs to be aware of what's been happening in marketing so that when they have their calls, they're also timely and relevant.
Yeah, I think it's really important to collaborate on those success measures. And just going back to the question, great question, because you're right, we have largely focused on that acquisition, but there are lots more people involved in that journey, service being one of them. Account management might be involved as well if you're dealing with loyalty programs, cross-sell, upsell. Don't want to neglect that stage of the journey by any means, but if we're talking about the importance, I think a lot of that comes back to what are your business objectives? What are the priorities for the business? Is it around retention and loyalty, or is it around lead generation? Or is it both? If it's both, then it's equally as important to manage, communication in the relationship with sales as it is with service and account management.
All right, thanks for those responses. Got some really good sort of ideas and thoughts so far on how to improve alignment. But something we've kind of not dived into or delved into too much at the moment, or so far, is technology. And Adrian, I was wondering if you could pick this one up in terms of how does technology support alignment? So what sort of tools are there that are available?
Yeah, sure. So I think as Marika touched on, that digital body language, one of the big kind of blind spots for sales was what was happening and what digital body language, how were people engaging? And so one thing that technology does let us do easily is get access to and understand that digital body language more. And we're also able to have that available to salespeople. So sales enablement tools, like so kind of an Eloquent profiler, enable salespeople to see that snapshot and drill into it and understand how people have been, how that contact's been engaging or that buyer's been engaging so far. There's sort of lead status updates. So as you go through and salespeople update the status of a lead or an opportunity, that can be fed back to marketing so that you can understand what's happened. We can add more profile information. They're looking to purchase in 3 months' time. Or there's some other people that are involved in the decision. So maybe some account-based marketing is required. So it's not just a simple one-to-one transaction. It's actually expanded out. We need to think about how we're going to communicate to the customer a little bit more. We can use lead and customer engagement scores to prioritize or filter leads, so we can be clever about who we think would like to talk to us or who might need some guidance and how we can help. And then with that CRM interaction, we can also start to build smarter nurturing campaigns around who hasn't been if we haven't been able to contact somebody or we haven't been able to follow up, maybe that's an opportunity to do some smarter nurturing. And then when they re-engage, take them out of the nurture process. So we're adjusting the cadence and the types of communication a bit more cleverly around the sort of the types of channels. And I touched on before just about how many leads and trying to control the flow of leads kind of, through the pipeline. And that's something that from a marketing perspective we can do. And that's dependent on really what that pipeline's doing and how busy essentially the sales team are, and almost fluctuate the campaigns to drive that amount of activity. And in some cases that'll be as much as possible, but in other cases it might be that they're operating at a kind of at a maximum level, and we can make some decisions from a marketing perspective based on that. So there's lots of ways that the technology is really helping to drive that.
There's lots of those sales enablement tools. What I would say is, if you haven't got the basics in place, start there. Start with your CRM. So many of my clients in New Zealand have to start with their CRM and integrate that first, so that they're getting that single view of the customer in one place, and everyone has access to that. Without that, marketing are working on half the information and sales are working on the other half. And if you don't have a single view across the organization, you're not going to be able to seamlessly hand over between you, and it's not going to create the best customer experience.
That's true, but it doesn't have to be super complicated either, right? It doesn't have to be all data and a view of everything. You can start with just the data that you need to make the right decisions and to share the information that you need. So I think often it's seen as a very complex and something that really takes a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't have to start that way.
Correct. Yeah.
And sort of taking some of those sort of points, and the fact that it doesn't have to be a complex sort of solution, especially at the start of the process. Jay, I was wondering what sort of issues you've seen with sort of perhaps specifically with processes, maybe rather than sort of the technology aspect that you've come across, and how you can improve those issues.
Yeah, and I think Adrian and Marika sort of touched on, how to overcome it, but it's the age old, and what the poll sort of highlighted was, the issues and processes that you need to overcome is that, that siloed data that comes from, that lack of communication. Does your marketing and sales teams have a regular catch up to ensure that they are in alignment? is there a mutual agreement between the two about what is a qualified MQL before it gets moved through to an SQL within your teams. Now, if you have those, if you can also work agreement around the SLAs, in that, how long does it, or what sort of information do you need before you can transition through to the sales? If you have that communication, if you have that alignment, then you really do reduce the issues. And like we sort of said before, the CRM is a great place to have all that as a starting basis. And the old saying that, knowledge is power is really something that needs to be removed from the conversation. It really needs to be shared amongst both sales and marketing. If you can share the information, then you remove the barriers to being, to having that improved process for the sales, for the customer.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Quite conscious we're coming up to 11:45 now. So I'd just like to kind of finish this up with a sort of question to all three of you. I think I'll start with you though, Jay, but what are the three key things that people listening today should focus on if they're looking to improve alignment, sort of a takeaway for them?
Three. Well, I think they were all sort of answered. I think it's sort of come out in the polls, but I think the key thing I would suggest is making sure that you have an alignment around your goals from what do you want the customer to achieve. What is the goal you want to get through. Have that regular cadence between the sales and marketing around what the left hand is doing, so the right hand knows what's going on. And then the one thing that I don't think we've touched on, but it's really important, is using that data and using the teams. Make sure you close off that feedback loop, so that if you are running a campaign or you are doing something, you have that moment and that time where you can review. And review isn't just a simple case of sending out an A4 piece of paper saying this campaign generated X amount of leads. It was fantastic and everyone enjoyed the croissants. It's more so analysing how was the time spent, how were the leads captured, what information have we got, is it the right information that we've captured from them, have sales been able to do something with it, so that moving forward, you can evolve your campaigns and you can use the data and technology at your disposal to make sure that each campaign that you run is better aligned between the two departments and a greater success for the organisation.
Yeah, cheers, Jay. And sorry, I did say we're sort of finishing up there, but we have had one more question come through from an attendee. So I just wanted to put that to you, and this will be the last one. What are the thoughts on the higher qualified leads being sent to sales? So the sort of hot lead being sent to sales with a recommendation messaging from the marketer's point of view. Do you think this could help with painting a picture of the follow-up and be more time efficient rather than setting up time with marketing? I think it's in terms of including sort of a message with the hot leads that are being sent to sales, if I understand that correctly.
So I think this goes back to sharing that information that has happened all of the way through up to the point at which they became a hot lead, right? So it's completely appropriate for you, if the salesperson doesn't have access to that information, in a self-serve manner, like Adrian was talking about Profiler earlier. If they don't have access to that, it's entirely appropriate for you to send the lead across and explain all of the engagement that has happened prior to that. Whether that happens in a meeting or in a message is, whatever it's culturally appropriate for your organisation, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's quite, obviously depends on the volume of leads. Probably hard to have a recommended specific message for a specific lead, but I think around a campaign you could have messaging, and that would make a lot of sense then to have to drive similar messaging through the marketing campaigns. Actually, even right up front, you could do it through awareness and then do it through the marketing campaigns that you're sending out, and then have events and then carry that through so that the messaging is consistent for the sales team. And one way that marketing can make that quite easy for salespeople is with a tool like Engage, where you can actually set templates up in the CRM that are consistent with that messaging, consistent with that branding, and then might have things like documents or attachments or links that you could use that's set up for the salespeople. So that kind of makes it even more seamless, really, to be able to carry on that conversation around a particular, let's say you were focused on, for example, a launch or something that you particularly wanted to focus on for a period of time as part of your marketing and sales strategy.
Great. And thanks for that question, Craig. All right, there we are. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today, both the attendees and the panelists. It would have been great to sort of go on and on, but we've all got to get to meetings, like I'm sure you do as well. But thanks again. We'll provide some more information about the technologies and tools and various other things discussed today in the post-webinar comms, which we'll distribute in the next few days. Just wanted to make you aware of the next webinar in this series, because this was part 2 of a 5-part series. So the next one's all about lead management. That's going to be on July 9th. We're going to chat about sort of lead nurturing, more detail about lead scoring, and provide some examples of lead nurturing campaigns and scoring models we use, as well as some overall best practice. So we'll share more information about that webinar, as well as a recording for this one in the post-event comms. So thanks again. And of course, reach out to any of us if you'd like to have a discussion about improving alignment at your organization. Take care, and we'll see you next time.